Well, welcome to our May 2026 Buyers Workshop. This is a webinar, and we're going to be looking at several different things with Rich Cordova. And Rich, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hello. I'm Rich Cordova. I'm a local mortgage broker here in the Southern Utah area. My brokerage is True Rate Home Loans, and David has invited me to speak a little bit in relation to how this meshes with the home loan process. Obviously, Dave helps them go out and find the house. I'll speak a little bit as far as how the financing can help strengthen those offers. So.
Perfect. Well, the first thing that we have titled on what we're talking about is how to win a home without overpaying. And I know this seems a little bit strange to bring a lender in on this because you don't always see this side of the negotiation, but trust me, you're a big part of this. So I'm going to put on my listing agent hat for a minute here. As a listing agent, when I see offers come in, first of all, on the MLS, we always say, pre-qualified letter has to come with it if it's a finance loan. And we also require the down payment to be the proof of down payment funds to be shown, because sometimes, it's only $5,000. Sometimes it's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And from our perspective, I don't want to get into a thing where 30 days down the road, after accepting an offer, we find out that the funds weren't seasoned or something of that nature. So there's several different things that go into what a listing agent is going to look for to to accept an offer. Now, right now we're in what I would call a balanced offer, kind of balanced market, kind of leaning towards a buyer's market. Just because inventory has been building up. Normally in our spring season, it's May, I don't know, it's May 20th right now. And normally this would be the highest volume that we have would be right about now. And although we've seen the volume increase, I don't think it's where it was last year or the year before. But, sometimes we get surprised by these little blips of crickets, I'll call it, for a few weeks. In that communication, a lot of times agents will just send offers without talking to me, without sending the letter and such. And luckily, we kind of have it in the MLS where, like I say, we've advertised that it's got to come with a, proof of funds and pre-approval letter from a lender. But the other thing that I found that has been really powerful is when lenders take the initiative to reach out and call me and say, hey, I've been working with this guy for a while. This is his job situation. This is that. This is the other thing. And I have seen several instances where we've had multiple offers where a financed offer actually came through and won. And it wasn't just because they were the highest priced. In fact, they weren't the highest priced. It's because everything kind of lined up. So tell me your experience from a lender side about any of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you bring up a really solid point, which is, there is a broad range of everything from pre-qualifications to pre-approvals. The issue with a pre-qualification is it can be just, something that somebody's filled out online. Now, obviously, we think they, with their best intent, filled out all the information to, the best of their ability. However, realize, like when it comes to income, there is a difference between what somebody makes and what we can document and what we can verify. So that's where it's important to make sure that, a pre-approval has actually been looked over. We want to make sure, obviously their credit's been pulled. Do they have, the credit to obtain this loan? We want to make sure that their income has been verified, not just their current income, but we need to look at a 2-year history. If they have less than a 2-year history, is this income variable where they get bonus hours? Those are things that can change up the income calculation. And if somebody was just pre-qualified and now we're in the process and trying to get that loan closed, those are the things that come up that now all of a sudden we have an issue and we can't get that loan closed. So, kind of going back to your original point, it's important that you have a seasoned agent working with a seasoned lender, because they can bring a stronger offer to the table. If I'm able to call an agent and explain to them, hey, look, I've reviewed their income, I've reviewed their assets, I've verified their funds, I've made sure that we can utilize those funds, not only that they have the money to close, but it's from a source that we can utilize. That way, at the end of the day, it's not that any agents or any sellers have an issue with financing. The issue they have is they want to make sure they have confidence that that transaction is going to close, because, at the end of the day, there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's the inspections, there's money invested into this. There's people making plans to move, scheduling moving trucks. And that's all predicated on if that pre-approval letter was issued, that we can actually get that loan done. So it's important for the buyer so that they can have that confidence to know, yes, I can actually purchase that property. But it's also important for the seller and the agent so that they can structure a strong offer that's going to look appealing to the seller. And like Dave spoke to, that can even go above and beyond necessarily the highest offer price. Somebody offers more, but it doesn't look like they're a very strong borrower. That could mean somebody's going to decide to take this lower offer because they feel more confidence in that one.
Yeah. And, there's another thing in representing a buyer now, putting my buyer's agent hat on. This just happened to me, and it's the third time in my 24-year career that it's happened. And my conversation with a buyer when we first talk is you got to get your pre-approval stuff done and out of the way, because sometimes it can take a few weeks because there might be variables. They might have to wait on a tax return, on a, whatever it may be, but it's not always instantaneous to get, down the road with a good lender. And I also tell them that, look, you can use any lender you want, but the fact is, if it's not a lender that I'm working with on a regular basis, it can be trouble, because that lender depends on my business over and over again, even though we don't have a financial tie to each other, because we can't. But that lender does depend on my business, and it gets prioritized. And a lot of times what I'll see is people come in with a lender that they met on the internet or that they were referred to from another state, or something like that. And we just had one where luckily we closed, but the lender called 2 weeks before we were due to close. And he said, hey, he didn't call, actually, he texted me, hey, we can close anytime, just let me know when you want to close. And I thought, well, that's odd because we already have a date and everything, but cool. So I talked to the buyers, and I talked to the seller's agent, and they're like, yeah, cool, sounds good. And my buyers were like, no, we've already scheduled the time to come there. They're from out of state, so we'll come at this time. Well, these buyers had a lender that they had used in 2 states for multiple investment properties. And that lender wasn't licensed in Utah, so he referred someone that was licensed in Utah. And I'm like, trying to tell my buyers, I can hook you up with a guy that'll get it done. And they're like, no, we trust this guy. We've worked with him for a long time. And, it's a long-standing relationship with the primary guy. And it's like, okay. Anyway, it comes to 3 days before closing, and all of a sudden they ask for something. And this is always what happens. The bank will ask for something in underwriting that is like a total scramble. Like, well, we've got, it's April 5th, and we need your tax returns for April. Like, done. We need to see what you actually submitted. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That means they have to get it into their accountant, and, just a massive scramble. And that's indeed something that came in just like that. And so they got it all done, and they got it done in time. And the lender kept stalling, like one thing after another. So by our real estate contract, we actually have 4 days, and most agents don't even realize this, but from the closing date, you have 4 days past that to where it can actually fund and close. Now, it's not supposed to, and it ruffles a lot of feathers. But I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want my clients to lose their earnest money and then try to come after me and sue me. I, didn't have anything to do with it. And it just so happened that we didn't do a final walkthrough, and I had texted the agent for a final walkthrough, but it was on Parade of Homes weekend, and this is in a vacation rental. And I didn't do that on purpose. Honestly, just wanted to do a final walkthrough to see the things that got done that were supposed to get done. And the agent didn't respond. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just request a final walkthrough. And so now we're like, I think we're 2 days late. And I, said to the agent, we didn't get our final walkthrough, really need to do this. And she's like, well, I wish I would have known that. And I go, you got to look on your text history because I did text you about it. And she was pissed, and I get it, but it's just, we have to protect our clients, right? And so she goes, well, it's rented for the next 4 days, so there's nothing I can do about it. And I go, well, I'm sure they'll be patient on it. Maybe they can change their plans on, coming into town and stuff. And I'm just like, dodged a bullet. But anyway, this lender ended up being 2 weeks late. And luckily, one of those weeks and some days was tied up in the fact that we couldn't get into the unit to do the final inspection on it. And then we had our 4-day window. And so luckily the communication between me and the other agent, we kept in communication. Communication between me and the lender wasn't pretty, because this is something where lawsuits come from and stuff like that. I mean, they had a serious amount of earnest money down and such. Anyway, long story short, everything closed. And I kind of credit it to communication, with the exception of the lender. I have no idea, why and how that came in. And it wasn't you. And so that's all I know. But so there are variables that can come up into that game. And that's why we as agents are more comfortable from the listing side knowing who the lender is and that they've got a good reputation. And sometimes it doesn't happen. And as a buyer's agent, it's like, I've only had 3 clients that have not gone with a lender that I recommended over the last 24 years. All 3 of those were problems. No one got sued. All of them closed, but it was an absolute nightmare. So we do look at stuff. Seasoned agents will look at things like that because we've had experiences, and, we want to look and make sure that we're protecting our clients. And a big part of that is the lender. Is the lender on top of everything? So thank you for the dozens of deals you've done for me, and you've been on top of it, because you're batting 100%. Next thing I want to talk about, and it's called the mortgage mistake that can cost buyers tens of thousands. I want to talk about buying points, sellers' concessions, temporary buy downs, APR confusion, and refinance assumptions. So I kind of want to talk about those things. So the first thing is buying points. Now, buying points down, I'm not opposed to it. I think in the right situation, it can be really good, especially if we get the seller to participate in that. And in a market like we're in right now, where sellers are having a tough time in general getting homes sold, that's a really potent thing for sellers to be able to negotiate with. And it's real helpful for the buyers too. But we also have new builders that are buying down the rates to 4% right now because it's built into their price. And that is literally what we're competing with in the market. I ran a blog a couple of months ago on UtahDreamHomes.com that showed buying down a mortgage versus taking that money, if it was from the buyer, not from the seller, taking that money and investing it at I think I said a 6% return, or a 7%, I think it was 7% return. And the fact is that you can refinance if rates go down. So you always kind of keep that on the radar anyway. And you know, kind of hands down, it went towards the way of investing that money and buying the rate down if the rate goes down, which, we think it will at some point in time, although it doesn't look like it's in the near horizon. But let's talk about buying points down and kind of what your take is on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really, what people have to be aware of is you want to be conscientious of not only the rate, you also want to be aware of the cost involved with the rate. And it's really a balancing act because obviously we do want to get you the best rate out there. That's extremely important because that's what's going to save you the most amount of money over the life of the loan. However, the thing that you have to throw into that equation that makes it, a little bit more of a conversation to be had is we don't know how long you're going to have that loan. Yes, maybe we've got a 30-year term. So, you assume, well, 30 years. Well, hold on. That's only if you don't sell or refinance. We know on average, most people only keep their loan for about 5 years. And I think that's actually shortened. But the point being is the majority of loans are not staying there for the 30-year term. So what we want to take a look at is what is that front end cost to get that lower rate? How much is that saving us? And usually I'll establish a baseline of, okay, well, here's the rate not costing us points, and we'll compare it to that and see, okay, it's saving us X amount per month. Let's say it's saving you $200 per month. Okay, well, that's saving you $2,400 per year. Over 2 years, that's $4,800. If it costs $4,800 to get that rate, after 2 years, you're now saving $200 a month every single month. But we need to kind of try to make a decision on, okay, how long do we think we'll have this loan? And right now, one of the challenges is if we look at historical rate charts, we do anticipate rates to be lower in the future. I can't guarantee when that date will be. I can't say, hey, on this date, rates will be here. That's anybody's guess. But if we just look at the trajectory, we look at how these cycles go, we do anticipate and expect lower interest rates. So right now, when it comes to buying it down, we have to weigh out how much is it costing up front versus how much are we saving and how long will it take to break even. And we also have to weigh in your comfort level because at the end of the day, we can't guarantee a future refinance. So for some people, it's like I'm saving the $200, guaranteeing that savings. And yes, if rates come down enough and I refinance, I understand that there were costs that I didn't have to incur to get this rate. But again, remember, we can't guarantee rates are going to get lower to that point. So it's also balancing in where you're comfortable with today, because we can plan for future refinances and we do want to consider that. But we also have to make sure you are comfortable with the loan that we're putting you in today. We can't put you in a loan today with the idea, don't worry about it. In 3 years, it's going to be lower. So that's where it's more than just getting pre-approved. It's getting pre-approved, understanding my loan options, my cash to close, my payment, and then also understanding how I can use my pre-approval to work with an agent like Dave to structure the strongest deal. For some people, they're trying to minimize the cash to close. They're coming in with minimal down payments and they don't want to have cash to close. So they want to structure the offer in a way where maybe, they're offering more, or in their offer, they're requesting seller concessions towards the closing costs. We can use that towards a buy down, and we can run the numbers and look at the math and see how much that would save you over, paying a little bit extra for the house. And there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of look at that. And if we're having that communication up front, that really helps, Dave or whoever agent's working with you to be able to say, okay, this is how we want to structure the offer. This is how we can make this the strongest offer to the seller so they'll accept it. And here's how we can make it the strongest offer so it works within, your financial structure and what you're trying to do. So it's, again, we keep hitting on it, but you do want to work with that experienced team because there's a lot of different angles that you want to be taking a look at and kind of balancing out to find the right fit.
Yeah, good points. And there's also just the variable interest rate loans, just to throw that into this whole mix, and kind of the confusion over APR rates. Those go all over the map too, because there are different types of loans that people can get where they're, it seems like really, really good right now because the rate's really low, but it's a balloon. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. We got to make sure you're comfortable with the loan that it goes to, because if in 5 years, if it's a five-year arm or something like that, if rates don't go down and you can't refinance, can
Yeah,
you handle that?
unfortunately, I know that regulations have cracked down on a lot of the misleading advertising, but one of the ones that I've seen kind of sneaking its head up is advertising a fixed rate, which it is a fixed rate, but it's only fixed for an initial 6 month, sometimes maybe even a 3 month term.
Oh man.
That's an adjustable rate mortgage. Like that is the very definition of adjustable. So, and if you read the fine print, it says fixed and gives the terms of that. But that's one I would say be careful of. Right now is make sure you do understand the terms. If it's fixed with a really good rate, there could be a really good explanation on that. There's a buy down associated or some other reason, but it also could be that it's only fixed at a teaser rate. There's some banks that are running these HELOCs. They look great, but what you want to know is, hey, what is the margin that I'm paying and what index am I, attached to? Because yeah, it looks like on that HELOC, you're only going to be paying 4.5%, but once it adjusts after that initial 60 days, it's tied to prime, and, prime plus two, you're all of a sudden at like 9%. So,
Right.
there's some misleading stuff like that going on out there, but for the most part, it seems like, most of the advertising is pretty clear and intentional.
Yeah, they kind of have to be. A lot of that got cleaned up, as you know, because you were working before 2008 also in this business. I think, right? Were you working
Yeah,
prior to-
no, that's right when I had got my license.
That's
So
kind of what I remember. Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is how buyers accidentally kill their offer. And as an agent, there's a lot we can do with communication with our buyers, and that's what we try to do. But ultimately, it's their game. So we can make suggestions. If they don't follow our suggestions, we're kind of like, yeah, we're going to be the bad guy in the game. But so one of the things is weak pre-approvals. We've already talked about that. The next thing is too many contingencies. They want it contingent on their house selling within, it could be a million variables. Their house selling and their house isn't even on the market yet. I'll put that one out as a pretense. Now, we work with contingencies all the time with people. And depending on the market, like right now, contingent offers are left and right getting accepted. If we go back 3 years, no one would touch them because there was so little inventory, maybe even 4 years ago. Yeah, 2022, there was so little inventory that it's like, we can't recommend tying up our seller's home on something that's contingent. I mean, it did happen occasionally, but it was pretty rare back then. So what people had to do in that market was they had to sell their home and move into an RV or move in with their son or daughter or parents or something like that temporarily. They had to have a solution like that instead of having a contingent offer come through. In the market we're in right now, contingent offers work, but for a seasoned agent like myself looking at it from the listing agent side, if I see it and that it's not on the market yet, I automatically tell my clients no, because I have no idea if it's going to present well on the web, if it's in the right price range. I don't know anything about it other than what the agent tells me. But without seeing the evidence, it doesn't mean anything, because I see all sorts of listings that go up with, iPhone pictures that are all crooked and dark and, just really ugly. And, when there's this much inventory, people are looking to nix the ones they don't want to see, and those get nixed. So good marketing has a big, a big portion of what can happen with that creative loan on a contingent one. And from the lender's perspective, um, you look at these two and we both kind of cringe because there's a lot that can go wrong with them. But at the same time, it's our job to just state the facts. I always think of Jack Friday from Dragnet. It's like, just the facts, ma'am. Don't go off on, this tangent. Let me just give you the facts. So contingent offers, which are very creative, they just need to be communicated well. They need the house that's being sold has to be marketed well, or at least as an agent, I have to know it's going to sell. I have to have a really good feeling about that. And from the lender side, you're kind of in the same boat, but you're not the one having to go do the legwork on, will this house sell? You're just the one that has to make sure that everything is strong as possible. So, we have to deal with that because it comes into delays sometimes. Now, loan locks are typically good for how many days?
It really depends. A typical loan lock is 30 to 60 days. There are locks that are outside of that time frame. So, that's where if we know there's a high probability of, something not closing in that, we could look at longer term locks. We can also plan on like, hey, we can do a relock. So maybe we lock this for 60 days. So, to your point, absolutely. One of the big things is even if you're going to have a contingent offer, you want to make sure you have everything structured in the background. So like that's the only thing that's going to, be in the way of getting that deal done. So there's a lot of things we can still iron out and make sure that it's a solid pre-approval. That way, even with the contingent offer, we know that that's the only thing in our way. Because again, we don't want, okay, now your house is sold, but oops, we got another issue here. The second thing that we do is we do want to look at opportunities to remove contingencies. Now, to be fair, sometimes this is a bridge loan, and bridge loans, I'll be direct with people, there is a cost up front because the idea is this loan isn't going to be carried long term. So there's not this interest charged over 30 years, that a lender is going to be profitable on. So they do charge points up front for these loans. So, at times people will not want to do the bridge loan because they'll want to avoid that upfront cost. And what we'll do is we'll go, okay, they're under a contingent offer, but we know if we get to the point, because I don't get into the magic of trying to work out all the details on those contingent offers, but I have seen in the past where if someone can come in with an offer and bump them out, it gave them like a window of a couple days to figure out how to remove the contingency. And that's where they have to decide what is the opportunity cost here. From what I've seen, since sellers have had their houses on the market a little longer from previous markets, it does seem like there's some houses that are maybe listed that you can get in, and if you can buy it today, you're potentially buying it for less than what you would buy it for in 12 months. So, what is that opportunity cost by saying, I'm going to wait till this contingency is removed versus us doing some other option? And, bridge loans are only one solution. Sometimes we get a HELOC and we can approve you for this other house, even with your house. So there's a lot of different ways we can make that work. Bridge loan is usually where there's kind of an upfront expense and we make people aware of that. And it's the whole opportunity cost weighing out. Sometimes there's a lot better options where we don't have to go the bridge loan route, where it's just a matter of, okay, you're going to have a mortgage on this new home for a few months, but we're going to be able to get you into it without having to wait. So it's more about having all of those conversations so you know what your options are and you're fully prepared to, go out there and put together strong offers and know what your backup is and, kind of know how you're going to handle it if someone comes in with another offer. So, again, we've hit on it time and time, but that's where having the experience and having a team that knows what they're doing really really can bring a lot of value to what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, I want to thank you so much for everything today. We're running out of time here, and I got going a little bit late. I apologize about that. But anyway, thank you so much for that. And Rich, what's your phone number?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your time as well, Dave. Anybody can give me a call here at 435-669-8003. My email is rich@trhomeloans.com, and my brokerage is True Rate Home Loans. And again, appreciate the time.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Rich, and God bless you. Thanks for being such a trusted partner over all these years.
You as well, Dave. You've always been awesome. I appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. Thanks.